Ocean Justice Initiative Indonesia pada hari ini Selasa 30 Maret 2021. And of course, we would like to welcome and say hi to all participants and also speakers, our esteemed speakers who are now joining online from overseas. Welcome, good morning from Indonesia, and I hope you are all well. Just a quick reminder that this seminar is bilingual. So if you think you need an assistant in a language, please use the language assistant button, which is available in your Zoom app, at the bottom center of your Zoom app. Our interpreters will be more than happy to help you keep up with the discussions. Baik, Bapak Ibu hadirin yang berbahagia, mengawali agenda kita pada kesempatan pagi hari ini, marilah bersama kita mendengarkan lagu kebangsaan Indonesia Raya. Hadirin, kami mohon berdiri. Hadirin dipersilakan duduk kembali. Bapak Ibu hadirin yang berbahagia, Indonesia adalah salah satu dari 14 negara yang tergabung dalam High Level Panel for Sustainable Ocean Economy, sebuah komitmen tertinggi internasional pembangunan ekonomi laut berkelanjutan guna mencapai kesejahteraan ekonomi masyarakat. Pada tanggal 3 Desember 2020, Presiden Joko Widodo beserta 13 pemimpin negara dunia lain, serta Special Envoy dari PBB, meluncurkan dokumen transformasi Sustainable Ocean Economy yang melandasi langkah aksi kegiatan praktis untuk mewujudkan komitmen bersama pembangunan ekonomi kelautan berkelanjutan. Bapak Ibu hadirin yang berbahagia, marilah bersama sejenak kita saksikan video tayangan peluncuran Transformation Document on Sustainable Ocean Economy berikut ini.
The ocean gives us life. It feeds us, entertains us, connects us, inspires us, and powers our success.
I grew up in a beachside suburb of Sydney, and it was very often the case that I'd head down to the beach after school with my mates. It is so much part of our way of life.
From an early age, you learn how to swim, you learn how to fish. That's a very important part of our culture and tradition.
Indigenous peoples have lived in harmony with our natural world and our oceans for millennia, and we need to draw from their expertise on how to better support and cherish and steward our oceans.
We are sailors, we are fishermen, we are industrialists, we are dependent on the oceans.
But today, the ocean's health is off track. At a time when we are already looking to recover from the unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic, we understand how vulnerable we are to health and other shocks.
It's important that we consider ocean as a partner. Life on Earth as we know it depends on the health of the ocean.
Research shows that a healthier ocean is a smart investment that will deliver social, health and economic environmental benefits.
The health of our Earth and the health of our people are linked. They're totally intertwined.
我々の未来は海とともにあります。
Nuestra misión es encontrar un balance entre la conservación y el uso sustentable de los recursos del mar.
I believe we can choose a triple win. A win for people, a win for nature and our economy.
Where effective protection, sustainable production, and equitable prosperity go hand in hand.
The Ocean Panel, composed of 14 serving world leaders, has put forward a new ocean action agenda.
Nous invitons à assurer une gestion durable de 100% des zones océaniques se trouvant à l'intérieur des limites de nos territoires.
Listening to science, listening to research, listening to best practices that we have seen work for many other countries.
Sustainable ocean action should be a cornerstone of national and global policies.
Pengelolaan laut yang berkelanjutan akan mendukung pencapaian SDGs.
We are looking for reason to believe that in 2021 and beyond, we can not only fix what COVID did to the world, but also fix the problems we already had on our plate.
Climate change, pollution, ecosystem collapse, economic instability, unhealthy diets, poverty, and unsustainable practices across all sectors.
The answer is a healthy ocean with sustainability at its core.
Oceans may separate us physically, but they can also bring humanity together for a healthy, prosperous future.
El esfuerzo por una economía oceánica sostenible y sustentable tiene que ser multisectorial y multilateral.
We call on more world leaders and other partners to join us in turning the 100% goal into reality and treat the oceans as the solutions for the future.
The ocean gives us so much, let's give it 100%.
Kita berikan tepuk tangan Bapak Ibu hadirin. Demikianlah peluncuran dokumen Transformation on Sustainable Ocean Economy yang sudah diluncurkan oleh Presiden Joko Widodo beserta ke-13 pemimpin negara dunia lainnya dan juga Special Envoy dari PBB tanggal 3 Desember 2020 lalu. Baik, selanjutnya Bapak Ibu adalah keynote speech oleh Bapak Menteri Kelautan dan Perikanan Republik Indonesia yang diwakili oleh Bapak Kepala Badan Riset dan Sumber Daya Manusia Kelautan dan Perikanan, Profesor Sarif Wijaya. Kami persilakan, Bapak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Distinguished guests, honorable leaders from the HLP countries, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to deliver the speech of the Minister of Marine Affairs and Fisheries, Republic of Indonesia, on his behalf. So he apologized that he cannot attend this seminar because of another task from the presidents. So please allow me to deliver a speech in Bahasa Indonesia. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan, selamat pagi, salam sejahtera bagi kita semuanya. Yang saya hormati Bapak Luhut Binsar Panjaitan, Menteri Koordinator Kemaritiman dan Investasi Republik of Indonesia. Yang saya hormati para pembicara dan pakar terkemuka yang berasal dari Indonesia atau negara-negara anggota High Level Panel dan negara-negara sahabat lainnya. Yang saya hormati para tamu yang terhormat, para peserta hadirin sekalian. Pertama-tama kami sampaikan permohonan maaf dari Bapak Menteri Kelautan dan Perikanan yang sedianya berkenan hadir pada seminar yang sangat penting ini. Namun karena adanya penugasan lain, beliau mewakilkan kepada kami. Untuk itu izinkan kami menyampaikan keynote speech Bapak Menteri Kelautan dan Perikanan sebagai berikut. Puji syukur kehadirat Allah Subhanahu wa taala Tuhan Yang Maha Esa atas segala rahmat dan hidayah-Nya sehingga kita tetap aktif dan dapat bekerja meskipun dalam situasi COVID-19. Kita patut berbahagia bahwa program vaksinasi nasional Indonesia dan global dunia saat ini sedang berlangsung. Dan dengan penuh harapan dan keyakinan, semoga situasi pandemi ini dapat segera diatasi. Saya bahagia dapat hadir pada hari ini bersama pemangku kepentingan, tenaga ahli, peneliti, dan individu yang peduli terhadap bidang kelautan dan perikanan dalam forum seminar menuju Sustainable Ocean Economy di Indonesia. Bapak Ibu yang berbahagia, dengan luas lebih dari 70% permukaan bumi dan membentuk 90% biosfer bumi, lautan merupakan ekosistem yang penting bagi kehidupan di bumi. Lautan memberi kita oksigen, makanan, dan mempengaruhi cuaca sedemikian rupa, sehingga membuat planet ini layak huni dan dipenuhi kehidupan yang saling mendukung. Lautan menggerakkan ekonomi melalui perikanan, transportasi, energi, dan pariwisata yang telah menjadi bagian dari budaya, tradisi, dan identitas Indonesia sebagai bangsa bahari. The Global Change Institute, University of Queensland, and the Boston Consulting Group pada tahun 2015 pernah mempublikasikan studi bahwa total kekayaan laut dunia mencapai 24 triliun US dollar, sedang kontribusi sektor kelautan dunia terhadap GDP per tahun mencapai 2,5 triliun US dollar. Seandainya kita membayangkan angka kontribusi tahunan sektor kelautan dunia terhadap ekonomi global, besarnya setara dengan APBN Inggris Raya sebagai negara terkaya ke-7 di dunia. FAO pada tahun 2020 melaporkan potensi sektor kelautan dan perikanan Indonesia diperkirakan mencapai 120 sampai 170 miliar US dollar, yang menempatkan Indonesia pada urutan ketiga ekonomi perikanan secara global setelah China dan Peru. Di luar sektor perikanan, berdasarkan data dari Conservation International tahun 2019, Indonesia juga memiliki potensi ekosistem mangrove terbesar yang menyimpan 3,14 juta karbon dengan nilai 47,1 juta US dollar. Sedangkan Ocean Science Journal tahun 2019 juga melaporkan bahwa Indonesia memiliki ekosistem padang lamun yang berpotensi menyimpan 7,4 megaton karbon setiap tahun dengan nilai 111 juta US dollar. Bapak Menko dan hadirin sekalian yang berbahagia, posisi geografis Indonesia merupakan salah satu jalur pelayaran yang tersibuk di dunia, dengan puluhan hingga ratusan ribu kapal melintasi alur laut kepulauan Indonesia per tahun. Investasi untuk infrastruktur maritim yang berkelanjutan dan ramah lingkungan di jalur pelayaran tersebut tentu dapat menghasilkan manfaat ekonomi yang sangat tinggi, di samping pendapatan dari sektor pariwisata dan energi laut. Begitu luasnya potensi kelautan kita, sehingga dengan bangga saya menyebut bahwa kita adalah nelayan, kita adalah pelaut, dan kita adalah kalangan industrialis yang hidup bergantung pada laut. Kehidupan kita yang sangat terkait dengan lautan menuntut kita untuk menjadikan laut sehat dan produktif sebagai investasi cerdas yang akan memberi manfaat sosial, kesehatan, ekonomi, dan lingkungan. Namun saat ini lautan kita menghadapi tekanan yang besar dari kegiatan IUU fishing dan kejahatan kemanusiaan di laut, masalah sampah laut, penangkapan ikan yang berlebihan, dan perubahan iklim. Dan lebih lanjut, tujuan pembangunan berkelanjutan SDGs number 14, Life Below Water, sebagai pedoman internasional tertinggi untuk membangun laut pun belum menerima perhatian politik dunia sebagaimana mestinya. Bapak Menko dan hadirin sekalian yang berbahagia, memahami tantangan ini pada tahun 2017, 14 pemimpin negara yang mewakili regional yang berbeda realitas sosial, ekonomi, dan budaya telah bersatu dengan keyakinan yang sama bahwa keseimbangan antara konservasi dan pemanfaatan sumber daya laut secara berkelanjutan akan membawa kemakmuran dunia. Kelompok pemimpin dunia tergabung dalam Ocean Panel yang membentuk panel tingkat tinggi untuk ekonomi laut berkelanjutan, atau kita sebut sebagai High Level Panel for Sustainable Ocean Economy. Dalam 3 tahun, negara-negara HLP telah menyusun dokumen sebagai dasar ilmiah yang komprehensif untuk membantu merumuskan kebijakan pengelolaan laut yang berkelanjutan. Di antaranya adalah Blue Papers, Ocean Climate Reports, Sustainable Ocean Economy Reports, dan yang baru saja diluncurkan bulan Desember kemarin oleh Presiden Joko Widodo bersama 13 anggota HLP lainnya. Sebagaimana kita saksikan dalam video tadi adalah dokumen Transformation on Sustainable Ocean Economy. Bapak Menko, Bapak Duta Besar, dan para hadirin sekalian yang berbahagia, dokumen Transformation Sustainable Ocean Economy mendorong studi tentang 5 bidang prioritas, antara lain status kekayaan laut, Ocean Wealth, status kesehatan laut, Ocean Health, status mengenai distribusi manfaat sumber daya laut yang adil, Ocean Equity, ketersediaan pengetahuan laut, Ocean Knowledge, dan pembiayaan upaya kesehatan dan pengelolaan sumber daya laut, Ocean Finance. Namun demikian, kelima fokus HLP itu tidak mungkin bisa dicapai tanpa koordinasi dan kerjasama multisektoral dan multi-stakeholder bersama seluruh komponen pemerintah dan masyarakat. Sebagai contoh, Ocean Finance membutuhkan upaya untuk koordinasi penanaman modal dan investasi biru berkelanjutan sektor laut. Kesehatan laut berupaya untuk bersama kementerian dan lembaga terkait lingkungan hidup beserta Pemda dan kelompok masyarakat. Distribusi pemanfaatan kekayaan laut yang adil untuk seluruh masyarakat Indonesia, Ocean Equity, membutuhkan peran aktif dunia usaha. Sementara itu, penyadaran akan kecintaan terhadap laut atau Ocean Knowledge sangat membutuhkan kerjasama dan partisipasi dunia pendidikan dan kelompok masyarakat. Untuk mengimplementasikan kelima fokus HLP SOE, KKP memiliki 3 program terobosan yang bermuara pada keberlanjutan sumber daya laut dan perikanan nasional. Yang pertama, kita mendorong peningkatan penerimaan negara bukan pajak dari sumber daya alam perikanan tangkap, dengan maksud agar seluruh kekayaan alam yang diperoleh dari masyarakat ditarik untuk kesejahteraan masyarakat dan didistribusikan kembali kepada para nelayan, para masyarakat yang tinggal di pesisir, sehingga mereka mampu hidup dengan layak. Yang kedua adalah kita membangun perikanan budidaya untuk kesejahteraan. Komoditas-komoditas unggulan seperti tuna, udang, rumput laut, lobster, dan sebagainya, kita dorong untuk bisa mampu dibudidayakan, dan akhirnya menjadi andalan ekspor bagi bangsa Indonesia. Yang ketiga adalah pembangunan kampung-kampung budidaya untuk pemulihan ekonomi masyarakat dan penyerapan tenaga kerja. Di sini kita mendorong setiap kelompok-kelompok masyarakat, desa-desa pesisir, desa-desa di lingkungan pedalaman di perairan umum daratan, mereka mampu membangun sumber daya perikanan untuk ketahanan pangan di regional, di lokal masing-masing. Dalam upaya sinkronisasi kelima fokus tersebut dan 3 program terobosan Kementerian Kelautan dan Perikanan, kita melihat ada beberapa tantangan yang harus kita hadapi. Yang pertama, Indonesia membutuhkan dukungan internasional di dalam rangka untuk menjaga biodiversity kita, sehingga tidak terjadi aliran perdagangan lintas benua, lintas negara untuk plasma nutfah. Salah satunya adalah benih-benih lobster. Kita mengharapkan dukungan internasional agar mampu mendukung kita melihat bahwa perdagangan internasional untuk plasma nutfah dapat dikategorikan sebagai IUU fishing. Itu kita mohon dukungan dari seluruh negara-negara HLP untuk dapat memasukkan opsi itu sebagai salah satu pemikiran di masa yang akan datang, untuk menjamin keberlanjutan dari sumber daya kelautan yang kita miliki. Yang kedua, Indonesia telah mampu menetapkan satu area wilayah pengolahan perikanan, WPP 714, sebagai sumber plasma nutfah, spawning ground dan nursery ground bagi ikan-ikan unggulan dunia seperti tuna, kerapu, dan sebagainya. Untuk itu, ini merupakan bagian dari Indonesia di dalam komitmennya menjadikan 30% wilayah laut sebagai area conservation pada tahun 2030. Kita telah memulai dan kita mohon dukungan dunia untuk menjadikan secara bersama-sama di sebagian wilayah laut kita dapat menjadi area spawning ground, nursery ground, dan conservation. Dan yang ketiga, kita mendorong dunia internasional agar memperlakukan suatu kesetaraan di dalam perdagangan lintas benua. Salah satunya adalah persoalan tarif barrier. Indonesia masih menghadapi persoalan tarif barrier untuk negara-negara di target tujuan ekspor kita. Untuk itu kita mohon dukungan anggota negara HLP agar bisa memungkinkan Indonesia sebagai sumber pangan dunia ini mendapat kemudahan, keringanan dari tarif barrier, sehingga kita bisa mempercepat arus perdagangan komoditas kelautan dan perikanan ke negara-negara yang membutuhkan. Bapak Ibu, Bapak Menko, para duta besar, para pembicara dan peserta yang saya hormati, begitu besar potensi kelautan dan perikanan kita untuk kesejahteraan masyarakat, namun begitu besar pula tantangan yang kita hadapi. Saya merasa perlu untuk menekankan pentingnya HLB SOI bagi pembangunan laut kita. Keterlibatan Indonesia sebagai anggota aktif akan membuka peluang akses informasi, data, teknologi, bantuan internasional, serta peluang investasi bisnis di sektor kelautan dan perikanan yang berorientasi pada masyarakat dan lingkungan. Selain itu, sebagai satu-satunya negara ASEAN menjadi bagian dari ALP SOI, Indonesia memiliki peluang untuk tampil sebagai negara terdepan bidang kelautan dan perikanan di kawasan Asia Tenggara, baik secara politik maupun secara praktis. Oleh karena itu, saya mengharapkan seminar ini dapat menjadi wadah diskusi antar kementerian dan lembaga, masyarakat, dan berbagai pemangku kepentingan untuk mengidentifikasi tantangan serta peluang untuk bersama-sama merumuskan solusi praktis dalam pencapaian tujuan HLP SOI di Indonesia. Pak Menko dan hadirin yang berbahagia, sebelum saya menutup sambutan ini, perkenankan saya mengingatkan kita semua 3 prinsip pengelolaan laut. Laut untuk manusia, laut untuk ekonomi, dan laut untuk alam. Pengelolaan laut harus memberi kesejahteraan sosial ekonomi bagi masyarakat dengan tetap menjaga keberlanjutan sumber daya untuk kita dan masa depan anak cucu kita. Semoga Tuhan memberkati langkah kita. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Menteri Kelautan dan Perikanan, Sakti Wahyu Tranggono. Terima kasih.
Demikianlah keynote speech dari Menteri Kelautan dan Perikanan Republik Indonesia yang diwakili oleh Bapak Profesor Sarif Wijaya, Kepala Badan Riset dan Sumber Daya Manusia Kelautan dan Perikanan. Selanjutnya, Bapak Ibu hadirin, kita saksikan bersama keynote speech oleh Bapak Menteri Koordinator Bidang Kemaritiman dan Investasi, Bapak Luhut Binsar Panjaitan berikut ini.
Mr. Sakti Wahyu Tranggono, Minister of Marine Affairs and Fisheries, Mr. Febrian Alpianto, Rodiat, Director General for Multilateral Cooperation, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, expert from University of Columbia and UN Escape. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, firstly, at this juncture, I would like to appreciate Minister of Marine Affairs and Fishery Indonesia, Ocean Justice Initiative, and Norwegian Embassy in Jakarta for hosting this webinar. Indonesia is a maritime nation and determines to carry out its commitment to realizing the ocean in a sustainable manner through the transformation of the marine economy, which is currently being established by the government. The government of Indonesia is committed to sustainable ocean management, which balances food security and business objectives against sustainability and the long-term impact on the ocean ecology. The Indonesian government is currently developing a sustainable blue economic model where the environmental risk is handled and ecological damage is minimized, and where economic activity is managed in a way that restores ocean health. We all know Indonesia has the largest and most diverse coral reef, mangroves, and seagrass ecosystem, which are blue carbon ecosystem. Indonesia blue carbon ecosystem holds around 75 to 80% of the world's carbon credit, which means we have economic potential from our ecosystems. Ladies and gentlemen, we have responsibility to protect and restore health of our ocean and build a sustainable ocean economy that can provide food, empower coastal communities, and anything that can provide initiative solution to global challenge nowadays. Our oceans are still facing some threats, including the effects of COVID-19 pandemic. We need support from all multi-stakeholders to solve these problems. The document Transformation for a Sustainable Ocean Economy, a vision for protection, production, and prosperity has been launched at the end of last year, which cover ocean wealth, ocean health, ocean equity, ocean finance, and ocean knowledge. And 14 national commitments were also launched by its members a day after including Indonesia. It means we have committed to create some transformation to restore our ocean healthier. We have implemented some policies
related sustainable ocean economy, blue economy, based adaptation and mitigation and sustainable fisheries practice will be implemented through fisheries management area. And as a part of the economic stimulus, the government of Indonesia initiated the National Economic Recovery Program or Pemulihan Ekonomi Nasional, PEN, to provide and small, medium and not informal businesses. In 2020, Indonesian government was spending about 579 trillions rupiah for the PEN program and about 894 billions for marine and fishery stimulus. It was divided into 4 programs. One, capture fisheries. Second, aquaculture product, competitiveness improvement, and marine conservative involving mangrove and coral reef restoration. The budget allocation is the fiscal year 2021. For instance, for the mangrove has been allocated for $115 million, 400% higher than last year. As for mangrove program, the government of Indonesia will do a large-scale mangrove replanting, rehabilitation, and restoration for area sizes of 620,000 hectares over 4 years until 2024. And some support are also from PEN. This year, we have target for 150,000 hectares. Furthermore, this PEN program was not only conserve the environment but also support our communities by its labor-intensive program. Our people could receive the benefit directly and will continue this program this year. We also have made some reports related to waste management, such as replicate, refuse, derive fuel in 10 locations with national production potential, approximately 43,850 tons per day, or 25.75% of waste total, and involving private sector through collaboration with National Plastic Action Partnership. And we have more programs to transfer waste to energy that can be used for electricity. This achievement can reduce marine debris and healthier the ocean. It's counted 17.9 gigawatt potential energy from the ocean. But we found the energy from the ocean hasn't been utilized optimally. We still need support and investment for the technology and transfer knowledge. Ladies and gentlemen, in 2017-2019, Indonesia Ocean Health Index, the score was 65%. Meanwhile, the global of OHI score was 71 in 2019. In order to reach the global average, the medium-term National Development Plan 2020-2024 target will be strengthened and established in the coastal and marine areas, which include solid political and legal institutional aspect, increasing community welfare, increasingly advanced and strong economic structures, and the realization of diversity biological is away. Aside catching a higher index number, as I previously mentioned in the medium-term National Development Plan, also through increasing the achievement of a sustainable Asian economy in Indonesia is carried out through low carbon development and climate resilience, which includes aspects of sustainable energy development waste management, low carbon coastal and marine, protection of coastal and marine vulnerabilities, protection of water and food security, and protection of public health. Ladies and gentlemen, last but not least, the government of Indonesia has been working towards sustainable ocean economic strategy to improve the governance of marine and coastal ecosystem, achieve equal economic opportunities, and promote livelihoods. The strategy includes sustainable fishery, setting ambitious target to reduce marine debris and transfer to energy, as well as restore and conserve mangrove coral reef and other ocean ecosystem. On behalf of the government of Indonesia, I call the action for implementing our commitment in transformation sustainable economy. This implementation requires the involvement of multi-stakeholders for sustainable ocean. Finally, I fervently hope this webinar can refresh our ideas and commitment to save our ocean for our better sustainable ocean economy. Thank you very much.
Kita berikan tepuk tangan, Bapak Ibu hadirin. Baik Bapak Ibu, baik yang hadir di Auditorium Tuna pada kesempatan pagi ini dan juga Bapak Ibu yang bergabung melalui aplikasi Zoom secara online. Demikianlah agenda paruh pertama kita pada kesempatan ini, yaitu keynote speech dari Bapak Luhut Binsar Panjaitan dan juga Menteri Kelautan dan Perikanan tadi yang diwakilkan oleh Bapak Kepala BRSDM. Dan selanjutnya kita beralih ke aplikasi Zoom, platform daring untuk webinar kita yang akan dipandu oleh co-founder and director dari Indonesia Ocean Justice Initiative, Ibu Stephanie Juwana yang sudah bergabung melalui aplikasi Zoom juga. Saya sapa terlebih dahulu Ibu Stephanie, apakah sudah hadir?
Selamat pagi.
Selamat pagi. Okay, just a quick reminder for our speakers and participants joining online overseas, wherever you are. This seminar is bilingual in Bahasa Indonesia and English. So if you think you need an assistance with the language, please use the language assistant button available at the Zoom application, and our interpreters will be more than happy to help you keep up with the discussions. With that, over to you, Ibu Stephanie Juwana.
Baik, Bapak dan Ibu, kita tadi sudah mendengar keynote speech dari Bapak Menteri Koordinator Bidang Kemaritiman dan Investasi Republik Indonesia dan juga Bapak Menteri Kelautan dan Perikanan Republik Indonesia, dan terdapat komitmen-komitmen yang kuat dan konkret yang telah disampaikan oleh Bapak Menteri Koordinator Luhut Binsar Panjaitan maupun Bapak Menteri Sakti Wahyu Trenggono. Dan pada keynote speech Bapak Menteri Sakti Wahyu Trenggono yang telah dibacakan disampaikan bahwa potensi ekonomi kelautan Indonesia sangatlah besar dan dapat dimanfaatkan untuk memajukan negara dan juga menyejahterakan rakyat. Kemudian Bapak Menteri Luhut Binsar Panjaitan menekankan pentingnya memperbaiki dan juga memastikan kesehatan laut untuk dapat mewujudkan pembangunan ekonomi kelautan yang berkelanjutan di Indonesia. Baik Bapak dan Ibu, sudah ada 4 pembicara bersama dengan kita. Yang pertama adalah Dr. Febrian Alfianto Rudiart, MSI, Direktur Jenderal Kerjasama Multilateral Kementerian Luar Negeri Republik Indonesia. Yang kedua adalah Anthony de Varskas, PhD, Regional Advisor for Environment Statistics at the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. Beliau juga merupakan penulis untuk salah satu blue paper atau studi ilmiah di bawah naungan High Level Panel for Sustainable Ocean Economy. Yang ketiga adalah Profesor Rashid Sumaila, Director of the Fisheries Economics Unit at the University of British Columbia, dan beliau juga merupakan anggota dari expert group di High Level Panel for Sustainable Ocean Economy. Dan yang keempat adalah Profesor Yvonne Sadofi, Profesor di School of Biological Sciences, University of Hong Kong, dan beliau juga merupakan bagian dari expert group High Level Panel for Sustainable Ocean Economy. Sebelumnya saya ingatkan kembali, Bapak dan Ibu dapat menggunakan fitur terjemahan bahasa yang ada pada aplikasi Zoom masing-masing. Language interpreter kita akan menerjemahkan paparan dari bahasa Inggris ke bahasa Indonesia maupun sebaliknya dari bahasa Indonesia ke bahasa Inggris. Baik, untuk yang pertama saya akan persilakan Bapak Direktur Jenderal Kerjasama Multilateral Kementerian Luar Negeri Republik Indonesia, Dr. Febrian Alfianto Rudiart, MSI, untuk menyampaikan paparannya mengenai pentingnya kerjasama multilateral untuk mewujudkan pembangunan ekonomi kelautan secara berkelanjutan. Baik, Pak Dirjen Febrian, the screen is yours.
Terima kasih, Bu Stephanie. May I use English? Thank you so much. First of all, I would like to sampaikan ucapan terima kasih pada Pak Luhut Binsar Panjaitan, Coordinating Minister for Maritime and Investment Affairs, for a very inspirational remarks that he has delivered. Kemudian yang terhormat Bapak Sakti Wahyu Trenggono, which is represented by Profesor Sarif Wijaya. Distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, and as we now in Indonesia always say, salam sehat untuk semua. Let me begin by thanking Indonesian Ocean Justice Initiative for holding this very important event and for also inviting me to speak on the exciting topic of the need of a global action to build sustainable ocean economy. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to start by highlighting Indonesia's unwavering commitment to protect the global ocean. Ocean is an integral part of Indonesia. As an archipelagic country, we have always perceived the ocean as something that connects us, something that provides us with opportunities, and also part of our history. Indonesia actively contributes and participates in numerous ocean-related forums, AIS Forum, for example, which is initiated by Indonesia, the Ocean Panel, to name a few, which I will briefly elaborate later on, and consistently advocate the important role of the ocean, especially in regard to the ocean climate nexus. The ocean holds a massive potential, but only if managed and developed sustainably. Issues like IUU fishing has always hindered our progress toward a sustainable ocean economy. Combating illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing practices and its related crimes is still one of the focus of the Indonesian government. IUU fishing account for nearly 20% of the world's catch and even up to 50% in some areas. It threatens the sustainability of global fisheries in national coastal waters as well as in the high seas, causes enormous economic losses to coastal developing countries, disrupt the social and environmental situation of coastal communities, and it also exacerbates the effect of climate change on marine resources due to frequent use of destructive fishing gear. The value of key ocean assets is up to $25 billion, with services valuing up to $1.5 to 6 billion per year. Indonesia stands committed to contribute to the global action to support a sustainable global ocean, more specifically, sustainable ocean economy. That is why our President Joko Widodo, is proud to be a part of the high-level panel for sustainable ocean economy of HLPSOE, or Ocean Panel. Indonesia supports the Ocean Panel commitment to build momentum toward a sustainable ocean economy. It also aims to enhance humanity's relationship with the ocean and as well help support efforts made to achieve SDGs 14. We are approaching 2030 in less than 10 years, and there are still a lot of homework to be done if we want to achieve the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals on time. As all of you may already know, in September 2020, the members of the Ocean Panel had finalized a document called Transformation for a Sustainable Ocean Economy, Vision for Protection, Production, and Prosperity, which consists of 5 areas of action, namely ocean wealth, ocean health, ocean equity, ocean knowledge, and ocean finance. On December 3rd, 2020, the document was launched globally by members of the Ocean Panel, including the President of the Republic of Indonesia. It marking the next step of the Ocean Panel in supporting efforts to advance sustainable ocean economy and the global ocean agenda. In 2018, Indonesia initiated the formation of the so-called Archipelagic and Island States Forum. The forum aims to strengthen collaboration and partnership among archipelagic and island states and to tackle major issues concerning the ocean. This further shows Indonesia's commitment to work together to address problems threatening the condition of our ocean. 3 years after its conception, the AIS Forum has successfully proved its relevance as a platform to accommodate the voice of the archipelagic and island states. AIS Forum focuses its work on 4 key areas: climate change mitigation and adaptation, blue economic and tourism, marine plastic debris, and good maritime governance. Indonesia also actively participates in achieving the global commitment under the UNFCCC. Together with the Friends of the Ocean, Indonesia put forward the ocean climate relation narrative during COP25 in Madrid in 2019. The discussion resulted in the establishment of Ocean Climate Dialogue to mainstream this issue into the UNFCCC. The dialogue also aimed to identify the gap and opportunities to strengthen a concerted climate action. But with a myriad of obstacles hindering our progress toward a sustainable economy, it is simply not enough time for us to address it individually. Adopting more sustainable ways of managing the ocean is a global priority. Protecting its health will bring benefit to all. No country, no matter big or small, will survive or solve global problems alone. Building a sustainable economy is one of the most important tasks and opportunity for many countries. And we need to strengthen partnership and collaboration, continue to build momentum and complement each other, identify problem and solution, synergize and identify nexus across sectors. Moving forward in the remaining time we have left, we must build stronger partnership among key stakeholders to ensure optimal use of all mechanisms to support achieving the SDGs, especially SDGs number 14. Countries and all relevant stakeholders know the aim. This is why a global action is needed. This year, under the extraordinary circumstance of a global pandemic, our efforts are halted and setbacks are inevitable. But now we are presented with a rare momentum for us to reset our course, to build back better from the rubble, and most importantly, to do that together. And to add that, probably the most important, enhance cooperation to promote science-based decision-making. Ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, I wish to emphasize the importance of momentum building for the global ocean agenda. It needs to complement each other by strengthening partnership and forging collaboration, and let us make our world better and stronger for the sustainable ocean economy. And I wish you all success and productive in your discussion today. Thank you so much, Ibu Stephanie.
Baik, terima kasih Bapak Dirjen Febrian Rudiat. Kita telah dengarkan bahwa pemerintah Republik Indonesia memiliki berbagai program untuk memastikan keaktifan negara Indonesia di forum-forum internasional strategis yang fokus pada bidang kelautan dan perikanan. Dan kerjasama secara global ini menjadi sangat penting karena quoting what Pak Febri mentioned earlier, no country could solve global problems alone. Baik, selanjutnya saya akan persilahkan pembicara yang selanjutnya yaitu Anthony Devarskas, PhD, Regional Advisor for Environment Statistics with the United Nations Economics and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. Beliau akan berbicara mengenai accounting our ocean wealth atau menghitung kekayaan laut. Mr. Devarskas, the screen is yours.
Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be here and good to see you all virtually. And thanks for the invitation. And I'm excited to talk to you all a little bit about accounting for ocean wealth and with a focus on the ecosystem side of things. I'm over in Bangkok and as mentioned, the regional advisor with UNESCAP for environment statistics. So just a little overview of the points I'm going to hit on today. I'm going to touch on GDP as a motivator for why we talk about a different strategy to account for ocean wealth. And then we'll go into a little bit about ocean ecosystem accounting and, well, ecosystem accounting more broadly and how it might relate to oceans. Some of the data sources that are available and could be available to head into this accounting endeavor. Share an example of where an ocean accounting pilot has been applied from the Geograph Marine Park in Australia, and then talk a little bit about how we might advance, how countries might advance work related to ocean accounting. So first and foremost, and I think this is something many people on the discussion today are probably aware of, is that GDP, or gross domestic product, is not a comprehensive measure. It does what it does fairly well, which is it is intended to capture economic activity and be a measure of growth. However, it is not designed to address issues like welfare, sustainability, or well-being, which clearly is something that's very important if we're talking about ocean wealth. Because an increase in growth of GDP is not necessarily equivalent to an increase in well-being. And this is because as we increase GDP, we put pressure on resources, and those resources or assets may change over time in a way that does not increase well-being in the long term, which we'll get into in more detail. So as a result of that, there are alternative and complementary measures that have been explored over time. And one of the ones that probably is the best known is the inclusive wealth work that has been led by the UN Environment Program. And to the right here, you can see a short formula, abbreviated formula of what that involves. And instead of just looking at economic output of the economy, it looks instead at the combination of the social value of manufactured capital, the social value of human capital, and the social value of natural capital in order to sum up to this inclusive wealth index. And as you probably heard me say, social is embedded in each of those different categories. So it's not just looking at economic output measures, but instead looking at welfare measures. So how people are doing, how people are doing in relation to nature, and summing that up into a level of inclusive wealth that is more comprehensive than what GDP would look at. And as a result of having this measure, and if anyone's interested, you can check out the inclusive wealth reports that have come out. There have now been several. You can see how there's a divergence between economic growth and GDP increases versus inclusive wealth not necessarily increasing. And one of the drivers for that non-increase of inclusive wealth is that the natural capital stock is decreasing, and that tends to cause inclusive wealth to decrease and diverge from GDP growth. So to support this kind of work on inclusive wealth, we need accounting systems for natural capital stocks and flows. And happily, we have international statistical standards that are available through the System of Environmental Economic Accounting. And there are now 2 products that have been approved as international statistical standards for accounting for natural capital. And that ecosystem accounting work is advancing globally. So one of the first standards was the SIA Central Framework, which some of you may be familiar with, which was adopted in 2012. And this framework focused on assets like water, fish, timber, land, and energy, and developing accounting tables and supply and use tables related to these assets. More recently, in fact, this past March, SIA ecosystem accounting was approved by the UN Statistical Commission as a standard, the first 7 chapters. And this provides a statistical approach for evaluating spatial ecosystem assets. So instead of focusing on the individual assets like water, fish, timber, land, and energy, this provides a way of looking more holistically at the relationship between the individual assets and the ecosystem, and then ecosystem and people. And as you can probably see, this starts to form the basis for how we can start to inform an inclusive wealth measure related to natural capital. And as I mentioned, chapters 1 to 7 were recently adopted by the UN Statistical Commission in their meeting. And there are currently multiple global pilots that are underway testing ecosystem accounting, several terrestrial pilots, but also ocean-based pilots as well. So what does ecosystem accounting look like in practice? Well, like I said, it considers the spatial nature of ecosystem assets. And the key variables that we look at when we're thinking about this ecosystem accounting are the extent, or how has the size of an ecosystem asset changed over time, and the condition of the ecosystem. So how have the characteristics of the ecosystem changed over time? And if we look at the extent, this is just an abstraction, right? Looking at how you might delineate your ecosystem accounting area on the landscape, which is the area in the dark black outline. And that area is what you're interested in tracking over time. And within that area, there are several different ecosystem assets that you are interested in. And as a result of tracking those over time, you can see if the extent has changed. Now, clearly, the extent of an ecosystem is not the only thing that matters. So the condition is then discussed in the SIA Ecosystem Accounting Manual. And the condition measures that are mentioned here are going to be familiar to many of you who have worked on ecosystems and apply certainly to coastal ecosystems as well as terrestrial. And they include abiotic ecosystem characteristics, so we can think of things like water quality and pollutant concentrations, biotic ecosystem characteristics, so what's going on with the species that live there, the abundance, the biomass measures are what we can think of there. The age structure of fish, right, are something else that we may consider there as a characteristic. And then the third group are the broadest group, which are these landscape level characteristics. And these cover issues like connectivity. So has the habitat become fragmented over time, where species are not able to move between areas that they normally use as, say, nursery habitat versus feeding habitat, for example. So not only does it provide not only does this ecosystem accounting approach provide a strategy for standardizing a way of looking at extent and condition, but it also provides a linkage between the asset, the ecosystem asset or our coastal asset, right, our stock, and the benefits to society. And those benefits to society from ecosystem assets, and I'm sure you all have heard this term before, refer to as ecosystem services. And those are flows rather than stocks. Now, the ecosystem services are in the gray box on the diagram to the left here, and that shows the flow of those services from an asset with a certain extent and condition to society, and then as it flows to society where it will produce benefits and individual and societal well-being. And so now you can see that individual and society well-being links up with these measures of inclusive wealth that we're looking for when we talk about things like ocean assets. And you can see on the other side on the right here, this divides, and we won't get too much in the weeds here, but into stock accounts and flow accounts. And those stock accounts focus on the asset itself, and the flow accounts focus on those ecosystem services that come as a result of the health of the asset. So we can think of how much shoreline protection comes from mangroves that are of a certain extent and in a certain condition, right? That is the flow of services that society gets. And we can think of that in physical terms, or we can then, in those peach shapes that are on there, transform that into monetary flows. So what is that actually valued at? So there's a physical aspect to this and then a monetary aspect. Now, monetary valuation of ecosystem service flows are challenging, and we could spend a whole day talking about that. But just to put that out there are various methods for for valuing those ecosystem service flows. And chapters 8 to 11 of the SIA ecosystem accounting describe several internationally recognized approaches for valuation. And the approach that's used will vary depending on what's being valued. And this often will require specialized knowledge and modeling. So it's not necessarily the first step that one wants to go to. Instead, the physical side of things usually is. So why are ocean assets particularly challenging in terms of ecosystem accounting? Well, for one, as many of you are aware, they're difficult to access in terms of getting the observations that we need to populate tables on extent and condition. They may involve highly migratory species that are interacting with a range of habitats and using the habitats in different ways as they interact with them. There are dynamic interactions and flows that are occurring between the terrestrial landscape and the coastal and ocean landscape, and also between species that are interacting. And most importantly, or maybe not most importantly, but of significant importance is that local level data are often limited on both the extent and condition. There may not be enough studies that have been done to fully populate an accounting table for an asset or an ecosystem service flow, particularly for time trends. A lot of what we see with looking at these assets and these ecosystem service flows are snapshots of a point in time when those measures can be evaluated. To do full accounting to do full accounting, we need to know how those things are changing. So we need more than one time point. And that's where embedding this within a statistical system, a national statistical system, can be beneficial. So some of the data sources that can be used for this are varied. There are local data sets that probably exist that can be repurposed as a way of generating an initial asset and ecosystem service account. And some of you are probably aware of the graphic that's over to the right there, should look familiar, and it's because it is from the recent Indonesia report on statistics of coastal and marine environment in 2020. And I bring that up because that includes things that can form the basis for starting to develop an ecosystem asset account. We see indicators of condition here, right, where we're talking about the coral reefs and the condition of the corals. And we have the mangroves and the condition of the mangroves. So it's a matter of seeing how disaggregated that data can become, at how fine-grained a spatial scale we can put that data to be able to establish an account. There also are fish trawl data that can serve as inputs into the accounts, government reports, and academic research studies for the initial set of accounts. And potential condition measures, unsurprisingly for ocean assets, would include things like biomass of fish, temperature, salinity, and alkalinity, as well as vegetation cover, which are discussed in several Indonesia reports already. However, I said that these data sets can be repurposed for initial accounts. What's really important to keep in mind is, rather than relying on a academic research study that's done once in a while or every so often, what this accounting approach really should try and do is to regularize the collection of a certain key set of core data points that are collected over time on the ecosystem assets and ecosystem service flows. Global data sets also can be explored. They may be of limited value because of the spatial scale, but I just note some here, and those are our remote sensing and satellite data sources. And the UNEP WCMC Ocean Data Viewer has several global ocean data sets that you can explore at your leisure. This is just the global chlorophyll data from January 2021, which can be used as a proxy for potential productivity. And this is from the NASA Earth Observatory. Now, where have accounts been developed? There are several places we could have talked about. One I want to focus on is Geograph Marine Park, which isn't terribly far away in Australia. And you can see the process that they used here starts with the strategy that I mentioned before, which is first on the left, delineating what is your area of interest, what is your ecosystem accounting area, and dividing that up into the places that will be tracked over time. And you can see within that area, they've included different ecosystem types, kelp forest, rocky reefs, sandy bottoms, and seagrass meadows. Well, the next step after having those different ecosystem types is to develop the condition measures. And to the right here, you can see that they've selected certain indicators for measuring, and this is specific to the seagrass meadows, for measuring the condition of the seagrass. These include the seagrass meadow density, the biomass of fish, and the fish population that's present. And so this is a snapshot at this point in time of what the extent and the condition of this marine park is. The next step is tracking at a future time point that is determined on a regular basis. What do those condition measures look like? Has seagrass meadow density increased or decreased? What has happened with the biomass of fish? So that's the general idea of how you would put an ocean account into practice. So how do we start off with that if we're starting from, to build up to get to those ocean accounts? Well, first and most important thing is to build the coordination and partnerships across the relevant ministries. And this is because the data often, particularly for ocean resources, do not reside in one single ministry. And building of those partnerships will allow for the next steps of the process of developing an accounting system for ocean wealth. And that is identifying what the priorities are for the assets and for the ecosystem services. And the reason to identify the priorities, if it's not obvious, is that it's likely impossible to quantify all of the ocean ecosystem assets and all of the ecosystem services to start with, and can turn into a task that will never get done, essentially. So figuring out what are those key areas, right? Is it mangroves? Is it coral reefs? And then going from there is a good way to start with this kind of ocean accounting process. And that will help to build targeting of data sources, and also to build the data infrastructure. So how will that data be shared across the ministries, and how will access to data be granted? As I mentioned, rather than getting too hung up in the dollar side of things, the physical accounting is the key first step, because the dollar side is more complicated, and also doing the monetary valuation really won't make sense until the physical side of things is well established. And monetary accounts can come later. There are other experiences from other countries that are out there which provide a good basis for learning. And also, myself as the regional advisor here in the region for ESCAP, technical support is needed as countries, Indonesia is interested in developing accounting frameworks for ocean wealth. And I should mention that I've only touched really on the environmental side of things, but there also obviously is the human capital and social side of things that one would also want to quantify if we're really looking at a full measure of ocean wealth. So if there's any questions down the line, this is my email information. Thanks very much, everyone. Glad to speak.
Thank you very much, Mr. De Varskas, for the very insightful presentation. Bapak dan Ibu, salah satu hal yang kita dapatkan dari paparan Mr. Anthony De Varskas adalah pentingnya kolaborasi antar kementerian atau lembaga yang terkait dalam penghitungan kekayaan laut di Indonesia dan juga penentuan prioritas dan peningkatan sistem data. Setidaknya ketiga hal itu merupakan hal yang sangat relevan untuk menjadi fokus di Indonesia agar kita dapat menciptakan suatu gambaran berapa sebenarnya kekayaan laut Indonesia yang dapat dimanfaatkan untuk memajukan ekonomi negara maupun untuk menyejahterakan rakyat Indonesia. Baik, kemudian saya akan persilahkan untuk pembicara selanjutnya, yaitu Profesor Rashid Sumaila, Director of the Fisheries Economics Unit di University of British Columbia. Beliau akan berbicara mengenai boosting ocean finance atau mendorong pembiayaan untuk mewujudkan pembangunan ekonomi kelautan yang berkelanjutan. Professor Sumaila, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Let's input this. Yeah. So, okay. I think I should start by saying Salaam Alaikum to all of you. Peace be on you. And it's a big pleasure to get to present in this panel and to be able to reach so many people. I see on the screen about over 500 people listening. That's on Zoom. Who knows how many are in a room or something? So this is great. So the title of my presentation is Boosting Ocean Finance, and I will go straight away and tell you the outline. So I have three main key things to discuss here. First, the need to boost. Why are we saying boost ocean finance? Is there a reason? So I'll try to give a few reasons. And then I talk about why don't we have enough financing, sustainable ocean finance going into that sector. So I talk about barriers, and then finally I talk about actions that we can take to plug the ocean finance gap. So this is actually the report which was mentioned, the Ocean Finance Report, a summary of it, a very tight summary of it. And the report is already published, it's on the web. But in addition, we have a paper which will come out sometime this year in Nature Communication, where we even have a tighter presentation and a shorter piece for people to be able to grab this very quickly. So that's that. So I want to start with a few slides, general slides, and that kind of captures what we have heard so far. The two keynotes and two other speakers have all been talking about this. But I want to share my most favorite model. This is my model that I love most, and it's simple. It's down to earth. It's basic. So what this model is showing is that we have the ocean. The ocean is the blue area, let's say. And within that ocean, we have the ocean economy. So all the things we do, that either on the water, below the water, or by the side of the water, that is economic. All that the things we do, and it actually links to our culture and social things. We enjoy eating good food and all that, all those things. So if you just look at the fish economy and the ocean, there are two key relationships. If you boil these things down, one is the arrow you see here. And this is the arrow that tells you all the things we take from the ocean, all the good stuff, from the fish, to the oil, to pharmaceutical stuff, to enjoying energy from waves and all that. All the good stuff we draw and take from the ocean, take it into our economy, and we do all the stuff we do with it, all the production, processing, transport, culture, social. And once we do that, the thing we produce along with all our goods and services that we enjoy is waste, it's pollution, right? And ask yourself, where does the pollution go? Ultimately, it goes back to the ocean, to the environment. So two key things. From the ocean, good things come. To the ocean, the bad stuff we don't like go. So if we don't do this well, and that's what the whole high-level panel is about, is getting us to think really carefully, smartly, to do the taking in a sensible way, and to do the pumping out of waste in a wise way. Otherwise, we destroy our ocean economy, the ocean and the economy that depends on it. So this is fundamental understanding we need to get to where we want to be with our ocean. Now, if you look there, why did I stress that model? It seems that we are overtaking, we are overfishing, we are taking big fish first, we are taking the next big fish, we are truncating the food web, that's the fishing down marine food web that was popularized by Daniel Pauling and his co-authors. Not only are we fishing too much, we're taking the big fish first, and that makes the whole ecosystem unproductive. And whilst we are doing that, we are also hitting the bottom. In many instances, all the bottom trawling. You all are aware of the latest paper in Nature led by Enric Sala and co. And so we're messing up the habitat. And so this is not good for life in the ocean. Then we have climate change. Then we have marine pollution. That's the other arrow, right? The plastic all going back, oil spills, what have you. So there are lots of things we are putting on the ocean at the moment, which warrants an action like that of the high-level panel and all of us, all our effort to try to turn this around so we don't overfish and we don't overpollute. All right. Why am I saying this? Why are we all in this business? We love nature, we love biology, but actually, ultimately, the reason we care is people. Ultimately, it's people. I tell people, when sea level rise goes up and your city is flooded, you think the water knows this? You think the ocean knows this or cares? It's we, the people, who feel the pain, who suffer the pain. So here on this side, you see, this is the depiction of where we are getting our fish from the ocean over time. In 1950s, most of our fish come from developing fisheries, not overfish or over depleted fish stocks. But with time, you see that we are going down. And these two are from our group here at UBC. The bottom one is from the FAO, and the direction is the same, whether it's the FAO or academic way. And the consequences of this is what you see here. See this guy, is that all the shrimp I get? Of course, if you take down the habitat, you overtake, that is the shrimp you will get. And how about this lady here? This is what is becoming more and more common, environmental refugees, right? People, if life is not working, if you can't get your food, you can't live. People don't just sit down and die. We, the people, we move. This is how migration through human history has occurred. So we're seeing more people having to leave their villages and their coasts. So this is not just about the biodiversity, it's about people and life and living. And it's crucial that we turn this around, otherwise it's gonna be tough. And you know, the fish don't care, we have to do that. So this takes me to our report. That's the report here, and I was asked to put a team together with the secretariat of the high-level panel. We put up a team. Really, I'm very proud of the team. There are 22 of us from all continents of the world. We had our representative from Indonesia, Suzy Anna of the SDG Center, Universitas Pajajaran, right, in Bandung, So she is on the team. So we have people from all the continents, and that's brilliant, right? And we have women and men bringing their minds together, very diverse, amazing team. And so this is a collective effort here. And these are some of the results you will find in the report. The ocean is obviously a cornerstone of the global economy. We've heard this, we're talking trillions of dollars, right? And so this is huge. And despite this, the sector is actually drastically underinvested. We could find only about 1% of the ocean economy dedicated to really sustainable ocean projects. When we did this, most of it is overseas development assistance and philanthropy, right? That are dedicated. So, and with climate change, pollution, overfishing, putting mountain pressure on the ocean, as I've shown, as many earlier speakers have shown, it is crucial to protect and manage human activities on the ocean and our investment, right? We want to go there, we get all the benefits, beautiful, but we should do it in a sensible way so that it will continue to support us, but not only us, our children and grandchildren, because this is an inheritance, mind you. We have no right to destroy it for future generations, in my view. But to effectively do this, sustainable ocean economy, to effectively achieve that, significantly greater finance needs to be made available. We all know that no matter how good your idea is, without finance, your ideas just die. So good ideas die at the altar of no finance. That is why this is one of the 5 pillars in the main report of the high-level panel. So the ocean economy, as we have all said, is facing multiple stresses, and to sustain ocean health, it is crucial that In many cases, we need to restore because we've overdone it. If nature will allow us to restore, most of the time nature comes back if we haven't destroyed it too bad, too hard. So when we protect, we effectively manage human use of and impacts on the ocean. These activities need financing to be able to achieve that. So ocean finance is therefore critically needed, right? And I talked about the 1% I mentioned to you, and this is an example for the Mediterranean. There's a study that shows that for them to manage their protected areas effectively, so it can actually help the ocean economy, there is a shortfall of nearly $800 million. I'm sure if we do a similar study of Indonesia, we will see some gap. I don't know how big, lower or higher, but there will be this kind of gap all over the world, right? Now, and more studies are showing that protecting the ocean, sustainable ocean economic activities, enhancing them, actually is good business. For every dollar you put in, you get $5 back. This is good investment, and how you look at it. And investing effectively in marine protected areas, and thank God, Indonesia is one of the leaders here. 30%, you've already set it as a goal by 2030. That's excellent. I was talking to a group of African Union, and 14 countries in Africa have also committed. The Canadian government has committed. So this is becoming, people are noticing and realizing how important it is, so we can continue to get these benefits. Now, what are the barriers? In the report, we have quite a number, and here I will just give you a few. Current frameworks that guide blue investment do not set out consistent and universally adapted principles. So we need more principles, more frameworks. This can be at the national level, regional level, even at the very high level. We can do this globally. So you know what kind of finance, when it comes in, will actually help, right? Sustainability and equity and all the social things we care about. So this is not just about any money coming in, but money that really helps society meet its social, ecological, and economic goals. Now, there are still gaps, as I said, and activities like oil and gas. So this is not about boosting. It's not all about just new money, but it's also about using the money that we already spend wisely. And oil and gas, and Indonesia is a big oil and gas country. According to, I think, the UN, or is it the IMF, about $4.7 trillion is used to subsidize the oil and gas industry, right? In fishing, we are talking about 35 billion. So many of us in fisheries are saying, why not just turn this capacity enhancing harmful subsidies into subsidies that work for the people and nature? I'm not saying take the money out of Indonesian coastal communities. I love them. I want more money to go in there. But this money should work for the people and work for nature, rather than destroy nature, which the people depend on. You get the beat. So there's a lot of redirecting and repurposing that needs to be done. And this is now the actions. And I have a list here, 7 of them here. I will go as far as I go, but time is of the essence. But number one, the recommendation, and this recommendation applies, I think, at a high level enough in almost all countries, but now we're talking about Indonesia. Set up and implement new common guidelines and principles that help define what sustainable investment in the ocean will look like, and this can be a national effort, regional effort. Actually, it can be in collaboration with the Asia Development Bank or other big institutions, to come up with this framing that works for Indonesia and the region and the world, so we know what kind of investment to go for. Strengthen knowledge, data, capacity in ocean health and finance. This we were hitting our head on this all through our literature review. Especially in the developing countries, we really need to up our game, train the young people, let them understand how to do this so they can actually help channel good investment, good finance into sustaining our ocean and the economies that depend on them. Create supportive and inclusive enabling environment. This is where the government is important. There are some of us who they don't need government. I don't know which world they're coming from, right? Thank God there's no country that has no government, because the private sector alone cannot fix our problem. We need that collaboration. So enabling environment. And one thing we found, and I told you this, only 1% of the ocean economy we can identify as going to help the ocean be sustainable. I think we should raise this by a number of times. Imagine that Indonesia, we just lend that 25 billion. I suspect that is actually the first, the direct value of the ocean activities in Indonesia. If you take all the added value, this could quickly go to $100 billion. Imagine that the country is able to take 5-8% and say this we're going to use to create an enabling environment that will ensure good economic businesses, ocean ones, and that are sustainable. Stimulate the pipeline of investable, sustainable projects, and this is where the private sector, if you have a good enabling environment, the private sector then has the room to participate in a profitable and sustainable way. Explore new financing mechanisms and tools, and new ones are coming on board. You have green bonds, blue bonds coming on board. You have parametric insurance coming on board. You have all sorts of really clever schemes. There is a lady in Singapore, she's our co-author actually, and she has a financial system that is creating financial instruments to support women in Asia so they can do business in the ocean. Amazing stuff, right? So you have good examples around. Develop best practices to incentivize sustainable behavior. This is where, again, the government comes in, fiscal policy, subsidies policies, levies and fees, we are in the main economic people, and so you can use economic to help us really improve our management. So those are the things. You get more details, examples in the paper, but I thought this particular example would be nice to talk as I believe my last main slide here. This is a very nice creative thing that was put together to protect Mesoamerican reefs, so, and here they brought the private sector, the hotel owners who actually benefit, because people come, tourists come there, they stay in their hotels. So they were willing to pay some taxes, some levies into a coastal zone management trust. Okay, so that's one aspect of this. All right, we want to sustain the reefs because people come, they dive, they sleep in our hotels and do all the things we do when we visit on our holidays. Then there is the insurance company. Swiss Re was also part of this. So this insurance company then had a premium between $1 to $7.5 million is actually collected and put in an insurance scheme, so that when the reefs get hit by a big storm or something and people are not having their livelihood, this insurance kicks in and supports people so they can pull back and allow the system to come back. Wonderful arrangement, and a lot is happening here, and Indonesia and other countries can really benefit from this. So, my final slide. One thing we should all realize, and I know many listening here know this already, no sustainable finance, there will be no sustainable ocean or fisheries, and that will be catastrophic in so many ways, okay? Indonesia needs to focus on, like other countries, on removing the barriers we identified in our report, and there are a number of them. Some of them will be very suitable and easy. You have low apples, just go after what you can do, get the things started improving the situation. Innovative financing instruments, both public and private, have been suggested in our report, and actually in other efforts, because UNEP is also doing reports on ocean finance and other people. That could help Indonesia significantly plug the ocean finance gap. So that is my last sentence here, but I really want to remind you here, without finance in the modern world, nothing moves. So this is crucial. And Indonesia and all countries need to find a way to do this. Thank you very much for your attention. Thanks for the invitation to talk at this important meeting, and all the best, and thank you very much. What do I say? Is it terima kasih, right? Ya, terima kasih. Thank you. Ya.
Terima kasih Profesor Sumaila. Walaupun ocean financing ini sangat penting, namun kondisinya investment yang sudah ada masih di bawah target yang dibutuhkan dan masih ada beberapa hambatan atau ocean finance barriers yang ditemukan. Ocean financing ini merupakan upaya yang akan membawa manfaat yang sangat besar. Salah satunya adalah ocean financing untuk mendukung MPA contohnya yang pada akhirnya akan membawa manfaat yang lebih besar daripada biaya yang telah diinvestasikan. Baik, pembicara selanjutnya adalah Profesor Ivan Sadovi, Profesor di School of Biological Sciences University of Hong Kong, dan beliau akan membawakan topik mengenai Indonesia's ocean health, opportunities and challenges with groupers as a case study, atau kesehatan laut, peluang dan tantangannya dengan perikanan groupers sebagai studi kasusnya. Profesor Sadovi, the screen is yours.
Yes, can you hear me now? Yes, thank you very much. Yes. High tech for me, especially in the middle of the night here. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I guess I'm speaking to people in many different time zones. This is truly a great pleasure for me to participate in this important webinar. And I'm very grateful to Indonesia Ocean Justice Initiative for organizing this. So I would like to talk about ocean health as a general topic and some of the opportunities and challenges there are around ocean health. And I'm going to use groupers. It's one of the groups of animals that I work on, both in terms of biology and their fisheries and sustainable use and conservation. And I'm going to talk about this particular set of animals because I think drilling down into particular examples can be very instructive to show us what really needs to be done in practice in regards to the environment if we are going to be biologically more sustainable into the future. What's happening here? Sorry. Why can't I? Okay. I was a member of the Blue Paper on Critical Habitats and Biodiversity, and therefore the focus of my presentation will really be around these two particular topics. Indonesia has committed to this really important goal of a balance between the conservation and protection of marine environment and the economy. And these themes have been picked up in all of the talks, and I think they're becoming increasingly apparent as important around the globe, and maybe even with the COVID times, we're recognizing even more the importance at the national level to have good, healthy marine resources to be able to support communities. It's been said that there are major benefits if the marine ecosystems are sustainably managed, and that is a big if, because there are many challenges to doing this. But one thing that I have been very conscious of, particularly being based in Hong Kong for so long, is that we have a challenge, our communities have a challenge to highlight the fact that sustainable management, biologically sustainable management of natural resources is the friend of economic development, not the enemy. And I think often, there's a contrast being made between, if you want to develop economically, then you have to make sacrifices on the environment. But I think we're realizing that actually we have to balance these two much better than we have done in the past. We need a much better compromise. In the case of Indonesia, there are many, many risks. There is already risk to the marine life and fisheries. Those risks are high, and they are increasing from overfishing, from plastics, from degradation of habitat, climate change, and inequity. So there are a lot of challenges to move from where we are here to a more sustainable future, and that will take a lot of pieces to make that happen. All right, in addition to the the challenges of managing the natural resources, there's a kind of overarching umbrella problem of climate change. This is a graphic which shows that some areas in the future are going to have much lower catch potential due to climate change, and those red and orange areas in the tropics, on the highlight, of course, Indonesia is shown here, will have amongst the greatest reduction in catch potential going into the future. So that's one of those things that call for a really precautionary approach, thinking into the future. In addition to which, there have been multiple studies on the condition of coral reef environment in Indonesia and elsewhere. Again, the warmer colors, the orange and the reds, are showing reefs, coral reefs, which are at risk, various levels of risk, red being the highest. Coral reefs support coral reef ecosystems. They're fundamental part of the system. And obviously they support the species that depend on these systems, these coral reef fisheries, which are so incredibly important for fishing communities. So I want to have the grouper case study. It's an example of a reef fishery in general, but I'll also be making reference to some of the groups that are maybe more familiar when talking about fisheries, because there are a lot of parallels between them. Now, groupers, if you look at sort of a trophic web, groupers are intermediate to top level predators. And as Rashid has said and highlighted, you know, in many fisheries, we're losing some of the top predators. So groupers are some of those, amongst those species, are now becoming amongst the top predators in these ecosystems. They're important in these ecosystems. Indonesia, according to FAO data, is a top exporter of wild groupers globally. And I think this is not maybe fully appreciated because the landings of grouper are not necessarily particularly high. If we compare the landings by weight with tuna, the estimated landings by weight with tuna, with which there's much more familiarity, grouper landings are maybe about 20% of the tuna landed, but the value of grouper is a lot higher. So one of the focuses I want to have in this talk is the fact that you can have quite low volumes of fisheries, which often don't attract attention because they are quite low volume, but if they are high value, they actually bring a lot. They are very important to a country. And I think groupers are one of those types of fish which are sort of falling through the net in terms of their being appreciated for their value, partly because of their low volume. Groupers as a reef fish are important across communities in Indonesia. In some cases they're important as food, but in many cases they're extremely important for trade and for livelihoods. They are amongst the most valuable reef fishes. They're sold locally, domestically, and they're also exported in large numbers. And of course there is a grouper mariculture industry which is growing and being promoted. But this is where things get a little bit confused in a way. I think a lot of people believe that mariculture, fish farming, is the solution to overfishing. In fact, groupers, it is not, and groupers is a very good example about why it's not. Grouper is produced by both hatchery production, so sort of artificial breeding of adults, and it's also which spawn, which produce the young, and those young are grown to market size. But there's another way in which mariculture operates in grouper, as it is for lobster and a number of other species, and that is that the young fish, the small fish, and you can see examples in the middle of the picture here, are caught from the wild, are taken from the nurseries, and then grown out. This is in effect a juvenile fishery, and it is greatly adding to overfishing of grouper populations. So this kind of catching of the babies, let's say the juveniles, grown out to market size is what I would refer to as capture-based aquaculture. And it's extremely important to recognize the impact of this on the natural populations when planning fishery management. All right, so the grouper are caught and in Indonesia, and they are exported largely, I believe, to northwards, one way or another, into Taiwan. A lot of the frozen, chilled fish, I think, goes to Taiwan. And the chilled and frozen fish also goes to mainland China. Hong Kong is a major trade hub, as well as live fish. Transport is by air and by sea. And I'm going to come back to the importance of understanding these trade linkages in a minute. So I'm going to talk about the challenges, and then I'm going to talk about the opportunities of moving towards a sustainable fishery, an industry in grouper, and of course with relevance for other taxa, as I mentioned before. So the most valuable grouper species are the medium and large size species, and these are probably the most important ones you can see here, but there are probably about 20 species overall. Essentially, you have a relatively small number of valuable species, but they have vulnerable life histories, and some of them are already considered to be threatened according to the IUCN Red List. This means that they really do need careful management to ensure that they are sustainably produced. In Indonesia, there are a number of studies over of changes in catches over time. This is just one from a thesis. It shows the best day catch, the mean and the standard deviation over time between 1980, when the live fish trade began. So this is talking about live grouper in this case, to 2017, and shows a clear decline. It's a significant decline. And this is being shown in eastern Indonesia and also elsewhere. So the fishery of live groupers, which are extremely valuable, is on the decline, and there's a lot of concern about the future of this important fishery in Indonesia. So there is very clearly a need for managing this reef fishery. There's a need to manage for minimum sizes, as for certain other fisheries in many other places. And the idea of a minimum size is to protect the wild juveniles, the babies, so that enough of them grow large enough to reproduce and replenish the fished populations. As was mentioned earlier, we need to safeguard, look after spawning adults, the reproductive adults. In the case of groupers, they often form these big spawning groups called aggregations, which are very easy to overfish. And so those could be part of protected areas, in marine protected areas. Nurseries need protecting, and there needs to be a focus on sustainable hatchery-based mariculture, which ultimately, hopefully, will phase out capture-based aquaculture. In other words, phase out the capture of juveniles. And I think this is going to be very important going into the future for ensuring that the grouper populations are retained in all their value. So to summarize on the challenges, we've got in the grouper fisheries and reef fisheries like them, we've got vulnerable species and declining fisheries. That calls for precautionary management. We've got reef fisheries in general, which are largely ignored for management. I mean, people often recognize that tunas need to be managed. Maybe there are management plans for lobsters, but a lot of reef fisheries don't tend to get much management attention, despite their incredible importance for small-scale fisheries and fishers. And mariculture needs to be managed sustainably. So this is extremely important, both for the seed part, the small juveniles, and also looking at feed sources, which is the subject of a totally different talk, but that also is a consideration when we're culturing these carnivorous fish. All right, so the opportunities. And I personally believe there are some incredible opportunities, and that there's still time to capitalize on these opportunities. And a lot of them have to do with making much better use of what is available, of recognizing the jewels that Indonesia has in the life around the reefs, and the value of these particular fisheries. So it's kind of widely considered that much of Southeast Asia's economic success is based on the underpriced export of valuable natural resources. And nowhere is this more evident than fisheries. And I will add to this, I think that the live reef fish trade of grouper is probably a prime example of this particular situation. So here are two grouper species. The red one is a very, very high value species. Not all groupers are the same. The colored one is a hybrid, which is much, much less valuable. This difference in value is important, and I'll show you why. The wild-caught red one is much more expensive. It's at least 3 to 5 times the price difference. Now, we did analysis recently. This was under the International Coral Reef Initiative, and we did an analysis which depended on information from government staff in a range of different countries, which looked at the declared export value of live fish. And these are mainly grouper. The ICRI report has the details. It's available online. Now, so I'm showing different countries here. Indonesia's in the circle. The declared, so these are the declared export values at the air, for air transport. Indonesia shows about $5,000 per ton. In fact, the range is much, much higher, and the average estimated price for grouper should be much higher. It should be above $20,000 per ton. In other words, exporters are under-declaring the value of these fish. This is one of the areas that could attract a lot of attention for getting more value, for getting more income, for example, from, tax, which exporters should be paying on higher value, on the higher value of the fish that they're exporting. So these are being under-declared at export. And if we compare to tuna and swimming crab, their export values, and in fact their overall values per ton, is much lower than that of groupers. So although grouper, my message here basically is, although grouper is much lower volume, per unit it is much higher value. And I think we need to be kind of looking at the value with using value chain analysis, etc., to really appreciate that. So the previous graphs were based on activities by air. There's also a lot of export of grouper, live grouper in particular, by sea, and a relatively small number of vessels which are doing these exports. These vessels are largely under the radar in terms of their activities, and we have information that shows very clearly that many of these vessels, these tracks show movement to and from Hong Kong, which is the major import area for live fish, and parts of Indonesia. These vessels are moving to and from places, particularly in Indonesia, some of which they should not be picking up fish. They are claiming to export maricultured fish, but they are in fact exporting a large number of wild caught fish, which are not the product of mariculture. And again, they're claiming export of cultured fish, which are much, much less valuable, as I showed you earlier, than wild caught fish. So a lot of that value is leaking out of the country. Those jewels are being sold off cheap, basically. And there's a lot of opportunity with existing activities to get more value. So here are the opportunities. And I've almost, this one is my second to last slide. Opportunities is there's a lot of opportunity, I think, to increase the value in Indonesia without outsourcing, to increase the value to local fishers, to improve the understanding of the fishermen of the species values and enable them to get higher value for their fish. One way to deal with this would be to phase out the export of these juveniles. Some of the juvenile groupers are grown in Indonesia, some of them are exported, and I think there's a recognition that exporting these young fish essentially exports a lot of the value, because the value comes from the grow out. And I understand that lobster was a very similar example. So keep the fish here. If you're going to grow them out, grow them in Indonesia and get the added value. There's a lot of need to improve technology and the legal requirements associated with tracking foreign vessels for example, they need to be accountable for what they're carrying, and to ensure that they are not exporting illegally. And there's a lot of opportunity for stronger inspection of air exports to ensure that the declaration values are what they should be. And this goes back to the fact that there are already many existing commitments to help and support national and regional action plans around the management of natural resources in CBD, CITES, and CEPTEC, the Coral Triangle Initiative. So there's already a lot of principles and guidelines. They just need to be actioned in the region. This is the final slide. It's sort of a summary of really what I've said before. And essentially, I'm talking about we need science-based management to sustain the reproductive capacity of these populations. We need a mariculture sector that's controlled and operated sustainably, the elimination of IUU, adding value in country, and that can be done by looking at much more at the value chain analyses and what's actually going on, what's being exported. Regional and global agreements could act as guidance and to support actions by Indonesia. And it was mentioned earlier, looking at the department ministry responsibilities, for example, in my case, wild fish, marine resources, hatchery production is mariculture, but there's a real mix in the thinking around mariculture and wild fisheries, and that needs to be managed. So I'm very grateful for this opportunity to present to you. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih Profesor Sadafy. Hal yang penting untuk ditekankan kembali adalah bagaimana upaya untuk memastikan kesehatan laut dapat meningkatkan nilai ekonomi sumber daya perikanan, dan perbaikan habitat maupun pengelolaan perikanan yang sesuai itu akan memberikan nilai tambah atau value added terhadap produk perikanan yang ada. Baik Bapak dan Ibu, setelah mendengarkan paparan yang sangat insightful dari para pembicara, sekarang saya akan membuka sesi tanya jawab. Kita masih punya beberapa waktu, namun mohon maaf jika tidak semua pertanyaan dapat diakomodir di diskusi ini karena keterbatasan waktu. So there are several questions in the chat box, and we also have questions sent directly to me. So the first question is for Anthony. So the question is, Indonesia's ocean is very vast, and we have very diverse ocean assets. And you talked about identifying the priorities in accounting the ocean wealth. So what do you think would be the best priority for Indonesia? Or how do you think Indonesia should determine the priority? And this is also related to a question from Rijal Idrus. If you have to choose between mangrove, coral reefs, and seagrass, which asset has the highest potential, hence to be should be prioritized?
Thanks. Yeah, that's a really challenging question. I think actually, I wouldn't assume to know for Indonesia which is the priority habitat that should be evaluated. But I think actually it sounds like the second question was kind of going in that direction. Yes, the oceans are vast, but actually if you start to narrow down to thinking about the specific habitats that are of interest, that's a way to start getting your hands around it. And actually I would go even further and say, is there like, let's say it's a coral reef that is the area that's of concern because of the connections both with the fishery resources and with community well-being, right? That's one way you can think of prioritization, is which are the resources that help to build this connection between the natural resource asset and the well-being of communities. Well, let's say it's a coral reef. Instead of trying to do an ecosystem account for all of the coral reefs in Indonesia, you could take an approach like with what Australia did, which is to focus in on a specific part of the coral reef, right? A specific set of corals that are of interest, right? In a given geographic area, perhaps within a certain watershed where there's development that might be impacting the coral reef, right? Maybe there's a good on-the-ground reason that a certain site can be a test case, and I think that's a way of kind of taking a bite at the ecosystem accounting apple without trying to do too much, is kind of saying, and that's why if you get stakeholders together in a room to talk about it, you can figure out, okay, we're thinking of coral reefs or mangroves, where are there concerns with our coral reef or mangrove habitat, right? Because it probably doesn't make the most sense to focus on the areas where there's no threats, no risks, no issues associated with the coral reefs and mangroves because it's a less interesting test case for changes in condition over time, right? So hopefully that answers the question, which was a big one, but that might be a way of narrowing it down a bit.
Yeah, thank you very much for the very comprehensive answer. Okay, so we'll move on to the next question. The second question is for Rashid. So we know for a fact that traditional venture capital investors are currently unwilling to take the risk in financing projects related to ocean economy because they think that financial return is not that high if compared to the risk they have to face. So what do you think is the best way to start attracting these traditional investors? And do government have to start subsidizing the local startups or establish some kind of enabling policies so that investors are more flexible to invest in sustainable ocean economy projects? And this question is from Grace Binowo.
Fantastic question, yeah. So in the report, we actually classified investment into three buckets, if you like. The first are those that are competitive, that can give you competitive returns in the market, right? So you have those that will just do it. They can go in and compete with anything, and that's good. And there you don't have any trouble because investors will see. They balance their risk and their gains and they go in, you know. Then there's a second group where you get positive returns, but they are not competitive in the market, right? So this is the type you are talking about. And there we need to do some clever things to be able to do that. And our recommendation is to look at all sorts of public-private partnership. We have blending stuff. The example I give at the end of my talk is an example of that, where you have hoteliers coming in to help and insurance companies build it. So you build schemes to reduce the risk so that the benefits will go up. There's an example from the Seychelles, actually, where we have this thing called blended finance, where the Paris Club of Creditors actually work through TNC and the government of the Seychelles and their national debt. They reduce the interest payment on the national debt, I think up to about $100 million, if I remember the numbers well. But then the agreement is that they use this money to do spatial planning and management of Seychelles waters, right? So that's a way to cut down the cost or actually fill up the gap, like you're saying. So it's a kind of subsidy, actually. And I call those good subsidies if you manage it well. So yeah, government can come in, the financial sector, the insurance, all to reduce the risk and possibly increase the investment. There's a third category which is actually more difficult. That is where we know that the ocean really gives us values, but there's no market for it, right? There's no market, but it's valuable. What do you do? In this case, only government and philanthropic organizations, foundations can actually help us realize that, right? So you have those three. Yeah, thanks for the question.
Yeah, thank you very much for the answer. We do have one more question for you. Yeah. So this question is from Yuliadi Kadarmo. The question is, how do we ensure that ocean financing will benefit to small fishers rather than only commercial fishers?
Yeah, another wonderful question. And this is a big challenge for the market, right? This is why I say we need government. We all agree, because if you let the market, the winner takes it all, you end up with the 80-20 rule, right? If you're lucky. In fact, I think in many countries we're even doing worse than the 20-80 rule, right? In the US, we're talking about the top 1% owning how many percentage of the national wealth? 50%, right? So you need to do something, and this is where policies come in. But this is so hard. You know. Let me tell you a story about subsidies. Before I met one of your earlier speakers of Assembly of Indonesia, we met in the House of Lords in Britain, G20 meeting. So they asked me to, I wish I had his name. This was a very nice incident, right? So I talked about subsidies, and your speaker really went after me. He said, Rashid, come on, we will continue to give subsidies. And I said, why will you do this, sir? Why will you do this? And he said, because we want to help the poor. We want to help our coastal community. And so at that time, I didn't have data. You know what I told him? I said, look here, if you want a foot soldier to deal with poverty, I go with you. That's what my life is about. But you don't improve the condition of coastal communities by overfishing the stocks they depend on. Yvonne has just told you about that also. So me and him, we went like this. It was amazing, right? That was what motivated me to put my PhD student, Anna Shobauer, to try and actually analyze how much of the total national subsidy we estimate goes to small scale versus large scale. So he did me a great job, right? I mean, he motivated, and we've got a number of papers. And you know what we found? Less than 20% of the total national subsidies globally goes to small scale fishes. The big trawlers grab everything, including in Indonesia, you know. So you are touching on something very important. We have to deliberately work to deal with small scale fishes, gender issues, and youth actually, for them to be able to participate in this economy. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much for the answer. Okay, now we'll move on to the next question. The next question is for Yvonne. And the question is that, do you think it is still possible for us to reach the goals of sustainable development goals and the goals of sustainable ocean economy with countries that have active activity on fisheries, but reluctant to join the RFMO arrangement and also other global collaboration to restore the ocean wealth?
Okay, that's, yes, very good. So I think I'll start. RFMOs, obviously they're very important. They don't cover many types of resources, including many of the reef resources. But I think that unless individual countries look after their own resources, then it's going to be very, very difficult. I don't think we can be depending, I don't think we can be depending on, say, consumer countries to help very much with resource protection in source countries. And so whether or not all countries are part of RFMOs, I think is a secondary thing. I think it's important for regional collaborations, but I think fundamentally countries have to look after their own resources. And I actually believe that for countries like Indonesia, which have so many reefs, more than half of all the reefs in the Asian region, so many reefs and they're so rich in resources, that if the country manages to successfully look after its resources, it will find that the relative wealth of those resources is going to increase, because essentially the country will be what they call a seller's market. In other words, if you have something that somebody else wants, you can dictate the price. And there are many places around the world that want delicious groupers, delicious reef fish, and that don't have any more. So I think Indonesia could really do what a lot of other countries that have this marine wealth in their own waters, is to look after those resources. So back to your question, I'm sorry, it wasn't a direct answer, but my point being that RFMOs, yes, they have their role, and it's very important that there's collaboration, but ultimately it's down to the individual countries to look after their own resources. I don't think they can expect other countries to play a major role in that respect. And I think in the end it will pay off, literally. Thank you.
Thank you. Another question for you, Yvonne. So the question is, how can we strengthen market pressure to ensure that businesses with fisheries products that are not caught sustainably and are no longer lucrative?
Yeah, so I think we're seeing an increase in things like certification systems fair trade activities. There's fair trade coffee. There's an increasing range of products with fair trade. There's a lot of interest. Having said what I said before, I do know also there's a lot of interest in many consumer areas for more sustainably produced product. And so there are, I think, a lot of opportunities to meet those. So, Marine Stewardship Council, even some of the small fishery projects. If there's, I think one way to improve the practices will be to tie up to part of those kinds of systems. So it's difficult, but having transparency and accountability and understanding the full range of the trade chain, where things are coming from, how things are produced. There are more and more people in consumer areas who are interested in this. So I think it is part of the problem, but I still think that it comes down to source country policy and governance to ensure that the practices are sustainable in actually the production of resources. So for example, just as Rashid said, the use of subsidies from some activities which are damaging now to more sustainable production, even within the same country. So I think there's kind of several aspects to the answer to your question.
That's great.
Yes, thank you very much for the answer. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. I still see there are several of questions that are coming in the chat box. And if you don't mind, Rashid, Anthony, and Yvonne, we will share your email address with all the participants so they can communicate with you privately in email if they have another question. Bapak dan Ibu, kita sampai di akhir dari sesi ini. Sekali lagi saya ucapkan terima kasih kepada Bapak dan Ibu narasumber, dan terima kasih juga kepada Bapak dan Ibu peserta yang telah mengikuti diskusi dan memberikan pertanyaan. Hari ini adalah hari pertama dari kegiatan webinar dan FGD menuju Sustainable Ocean Economy di Indonesia. Besok kita akan memiliki sesi kedua, yaitu Focus Group Discussion, di mana Bapak dan Ibu akan dibagi menjadi 5 breakout rooms, yaitu breakout rooms Ocean Health, Ocean Wealth, Ocean Finance, Ocean Equity, dan Ocean Knowledge. Jadi sampai jumpa di sesi besok pukul 13.00 waktu Indonesia Barat. Sekali lagi terima kasih dan semoga diskusi ini bermanfaat.
Gak usah, wis. Udah, gak usah, udah. Iya.
Thank you very much, Rashid, Anthony, and Yvonne.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I hope you it was good. You're happy